I watched my world die for a sin I committed, and I still breathe its ashes. They cling to everything here. To the broken marble of the governor's dais, to the splintered Aquila lying face down in the dust, to the cracks in my fingernails as I grip this cracked Vox recorder and force myself to speak. The air tastes of cinders and rusted blood, of burnt promethium and the faint chemical sting of virus residue that did not quite finish its appointed work. Every breath I take is a robbery from the dead. I stand in what remains of the grand administratum hall of Dorian Forge. It was once a temple to industry and obedience, columns of black stone, banners heavy with imperial sigils, vox choirs singing the glories of compliance over the thunder of manufactorum reports. Now the roof is half gone, torn open by an orbital lance that sheared through 3 floors and cauterized hundreds of petitioners in an instant. I still see them sometimes when I close my eyes. Frozen shadows on the walls, burned into stone at the moment of impact. They were here because of me. The recorder in my hand crackles weakly as I adjust the gain. Its machine spirit is tired. Like everything else that still persists on this murdered world, it has already done more than it should. Begin planetary testimony, I whisper, voice rough, lungs scraping against the thin air. Governor Variant Hale of Dorian Prime. Formerly loyal to the Imperium of man. Formerly. The word hangs in the ruined hall like an accusation. Outside, beyond the shattered archways, the sky glows a dull, diseased green. The Mechanicus turned off the atmospheric processors 3 days ago by their timetable, at least. Time is strange now. The wind no longer moves with any strength. It just drifts, dragging shreds of toxic fog across the carcass of my city. Sometimes I hear distant crashes as another manufactorum tower finally surrenders to corrosion and collapses into itself with a sigh. There are no more crowds, no more workers, no more processions of stamped documents and shouted orders. Only me. Only the man whose hesitation gave the Imperium permission to do this. I lower myself onto the cracked remains of my own throne, armor plate groaning under my weight. The seat is still warm from the fire that once rippled through this chamber, though the flames have long since starved for lack of air. Ash puffs up around me, glowing faintly in the sickly light. This is not a plea for mercy, I murmur into the recorder. The Imperium has already given me more mercy than my people ever saw. This is just a record, a truth no one asked for, that no one will hear. My hand shakes as I continue. The sin was not open rebellion. It was not heretical worship. It was not a pact with Xenos or Daemon. It was a pause, a trembling of the hand above a line on a datapad, a breath drawn between command and obedience. I can still see that moment with painful clarity. The Administratum edict had arrived, wrapped in red sigil seals, stamped with the double-headed eagle and the screaming cog of Mars. The courier servitor had stood before my desk, incense still curling from its vox grill, as I broke each seal with numb fingers. I remember the smell of sacred oils, the scratch of parchment, the faint hum of the overhead lumen. I remember reading the new tithe quota, increased raw ore output, increased manufactorum hours, reduced downtime cycles for the workers, reduced rations. And then, beneath it all, a single line that stole my breath more thoroughly than the virus clouds ever would. Supplementary conscription, youth labor cadres, age 10 standard and above. Children, my world's children, pressed into the gears to grind out more last cells and armor plates for wars they would never see. The servitor had watched with empty eyes as I sat there, heart pounding in my chest like a guilty drum. I had signed every edict before that one, every quota increase, every ration cut, every order for suppression. My hand had never trembled. That day, it did. I set the stylus down. I told myself I needed time to think, to negotiate, to appeal. That pause, that moment of weak, human doubt, was my sin, because in that heartbeat of hesitation, I forgot what the Imperium truly is. It does not negotiate, it does not bend, it does not forgive. And for the crime of my delay, they taught me what it looks like when a single world is unmade. I draw a ragged breath, ash scratching my throat, and steady my voice. This is where it began, I say softly, with ink I refuse to spill. And far above this ruined hall, somewhere beyond the toxic clouds, I know the ships that murdered my world still drift in silent, satisfied orbit. The first cracks did not appear in the manufactorums or the streets. They appeared in the eyes of my people. I remember walking the balcony of the central hab block 2 days after the edict arrived. The wind was thin even then, edging toward the sterility the Mechanicus preferred. Below me, thousands of workers in soot-stained aprons and respirators marched in tight columns toward their shifts. A week earlier, their movements had been mechanical, obedient, beaten into them by decades of quotas and catechisms. That morning, they looked up. They looked at me, and they did not bow. Their stares were not hateful. Not yet. They were tired, red-rimmed, hollow in a way that only starvation of the soul could create. It struck me then not as a leader, but as a man that these workers had been born into factories that had never once gone silent. Their parents had died in those foundries, their grandparents too. And now, the Imperium demanded they surrender their children as well. They were witnessing the breaking of the final boundary. I tightened my grip on the railing as chanting rose from the crowd, slow at first, then building, something between a plea and a warning. No more, not shouted, not screamed, just spoken aloud. With the steady rhythm of inevitability, Arbeit squads pushed through the crowd, shock mauls raised. Their armor gleamed with imported polish, symbols of unquestionable authority etched into every plate. But even they hesitated at the sight of so many unarmed workers standing shoulder to shoulder. My advisor, Minister Kelran, approached behind me. His respirator hissed with every breath. "Governor Hale," he rasped, "we must enforce compliance. If you do not sign the edict, the Administratum will respond." "I know," I whispered. "You know nothing," he snapped, fear making him bold. "The people are restless. The work quotas are impossible. The rations are stretched thin. If they learn of the conscription, they already know," I said quietly. Kelran froze. "How?" "They are not blind, nor deaf. The workers hear everything." I gestured at the crowd. "Look." Another chant rose, this one sharper, trembling on the edge of anger. "Our children are not tithe." Kelran blanched behind his mask. "Governor, authorize the Arbeits to disperse them. If this continues, I will address them." Kelran seized my arm. "You will be killed before you speak 3 words." He wasn't wrong. And yet, I could not remain silent. I had already begun to doubt the path the Imperium demanded I walk. I did not realize then that doubt is the first act of treason. I descended the stairs slowly, letting the workers see me fully. My coat brushed the ash-layered ground. My boots echoed against cracked stone. Every step felt heavier, as though the world itself was warning me. The Arbeits parted reluctantly, forming a corridor of readied shock mauls. I could feel their distrust radiating behind their visors. To them, hesitation was a virus as deadly as anything the Imperium could unleash. When I reached the center of the crowd, the chanting faded into a tense hush. A little girl stood nearest to me, clutching her father's hand. Her face was smeared with soot. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. The age of the new tithe. She looked up at me with wide, trembling eyes. "Governor Hale," she whispered, so softly I almost thought the wind carried the words instead of her. "Are they going to take us?" Her father tried to hush her, but she clung to my coat. In that moment, I broke. Not visibly, not dramatically. There was no sobbing or shouting. Just a fracture deep inside me, a quiet, splintering thing that would later widen into the void where my soul used to rest. "No," I murmured. "Not if I can stop it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The Arbeits stiffened. Minister Kelran stumbled backward as though shot, and somewhere above us, in a sky already tinged faintly green, the Imperium began taking note. I didn't know it then, but that single sentence spoken to a child trying to understand why her future had been signed away was the spark that would ignite rebellion, and the Imperium would answer rebellion with fire. The day the mission arrived, the one the Imperium would later claim justified everything, they did not send diplomats, nor priests, nor emissaries of calm authority. They sent a single gunship painted in administratum grey, its engines whining in protest as it descended through the thinning sky. The workers fell silent as it passed overhead, its shadow slicing across their faces like a blade. I knew, even before it landed, that nothing inside it would be merciful. The gunship settled onto the palace platform in a storm of dust and ash. Its ramp hissed open, releasing a wave of cold, recycled air that smelled faintly of incense and oiled parchment. A lone robed figure emerged. Adept Hierophant Luro Orin, the Imperium's designated tithe auditor. He descended the ramp with the piety of a man delivering scripture. Behind him marched a cohort of Skitarii escorts, their metal feet clicking against the stone like a swarm of insects. "Governor Varant, hail," Orin intoned, his voice amplified by the servo skull hovering beside him. "Your world is in violation of Imperial Tithe Code 773b, Section 12. You have been given 7 days to comply." 7 days, I echoed. "The manufactorums are already at capacity. The people are starving." Your concerns have been logged," the servo skull interrupted in a monotone vox. "They do not alter the requirement." The workers behind me murmured anxiously. Some shouted. Some cried out. Orin raised a single withered hand. The Skitarii raised their rifles instantly, visors glowing with cold red light. Silence fell like a guillotine. I stepped forward. "The conscription of children." "It is not conscription," Orin corrected. "It is labor reassignment. The Imperium requires only that your world fulfills its sacred quotas." "They are children," I repeated. "They are citizens," Orin countered. "And citizens serve." His expression did not change. His eyes did not blink. He could have been carved from stone. When I did not answer, he tilted his head. "You hesitate, Governor. That is concerning." A chill ran through me, cold as the void. "Hesitation," he continued, "is often a precursor to rebellion. Shall I note this in my report?" Kelran shot me a desperate look, pleading silently for obedience for survival. I swallowed hard. "No, I only ask for time to address the workforce." "A day. 1 day. Your workers," Orin said calmly, "are not to be addressed. They are to be commanded." I felt the heartbeat of the crowd shift behind me, anger tightening into something sharper. I looked at Orin. "If I force this tithe, the world will erupt. Then your people will learn compliance through consequence." The little girl from earlier stared up at me again, her small hand gripping her father's sleeve. Her eyes begged me for truth, for protection, for a promise that I could no longer give. I turned, back to Orin. "If I refuse?" Orin smiled faintly, an expression with no warmth, no humanity. "Then the Imperium will kindly relieve you of your burden." The servo skull recorded every word. The Skitarii raised their rifles a fraction higher. The wind shifted, carrying with it the distant groan of an atmospheric processor, the first sign of its impending shutdown. And somewhere far above us, hidden behind clouds and doctrine, Imperial warships waited for my answer. For one breath, one trembling pause, the entire fate of Dorian Forge hung suspended, and I hesitated. I wish I could claim courage. I wish I could claim defiance, but all I felt was a cold, hollow fear spreading through my chest. I nodded slowly. "I will consider the edict." Orin turned as if the matter were already decided. "See that you do. The Emperor rewards obedience." He boarded the gunship. The ramp hissed shut. The engines roared. As the vessel lifted, the workers erupted not in violence, not in celebration, but in a sound that would haunt me for the rest of my life. They cried, adults, children, entire families, all crying not in defiance, but because their hope had died in front of them. And in the sky above, the first Imperial bombardment signatures flickered to life. The first orbital strike came at dawn, when the smoke from the night's fires still hung low over the manufactorum districts. I was in the command spire, staring out across the steel plains of Dorian Forge, watching the chimneys cough thin trails of black into a sky already turning sickly green. Workers were gathering in the thousands, some marching with placards, others clutching tools like makeshift weapons, all of them desperate, frightened, directionless. For a moment, everything felt suspended, held, listening. Then the sky split open. A column of white fire lanced down from orbit, silent at first, then roaring with a deafening thunder that shook the bones of the world. It struck Hive, Branos, the closest of the major population centers. A second sun bloomed where its central towers once stood. The shockwave hit a heartbeat later, rattling the spire and knocking me to one knee. The windows shattered inward, spraying me with glass. I heard screams from the streets below. Then silence. A silence so huge it swallowed the world. Kelran stumbled into the room, face pale behind his respirator. Governor Hive Branos is gone. It's gone. Guilt struck me like a hammer. My voice cracked. Casualties. He stared at me, unable to process the reality. Governor. Branos held 12 billion citizens. 12 billion. Vaporized before they could even lift their faces to ask why. The Voxnet erupted with panicked transmissions, Arbeit screaming for reinforcements, Manufactorum foremen begging for evacuation, the noble houses demanding answers. All of them talking over one another, all of them unheard by the only voices that mattered, the ones aboard the Imperial warships. Then came the second strike. Then the third. Each beam of fire, a sentence. Each blast a judgment. The Manufactorum's vast skeletal structures of steel and smoke folded like burning paper. The sky became a curtain of black clouds and red lightning. High-speed picked feeds showed entire districts collapsing, molten rivers swallowing streets, hospitals becoming chambers of ash before the wounded could be moved. I activated the emergency Vox link to the warships. Static hissed. This is Governor Verant Hale of Dorian Forge. Cease bombardment. There are civilians, millions of civilians. A calm naval voice cut through the static like a blade. Compliance protocol initiated. Planetary cleansing is underway. Cleansing? I shouted. You cannot. Your world has demonstrated tendencies toward rebellion. Loyalty must be corrected. We are not rebels. I slammed my fist against the console. We asked for negotiation. We, Governor. The voice replied, clinical and detached. Your hesitation was recorded. Your workforce's agitation confirmed it. Rebellion has already manifested. A fourth lance struck, closer now, close enough to bend the command tower's steel girders. The floor lurched beneath my feet. The lights flickered. Somewhere below, the palace guards were shouting orders, trying to escort survivors inside. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered. This is not justice, I whispered. This is annihilation. This is salvation, the naval officer said, in the Emperor's name. The connection died. Kelran collapsed into a chair, shaking. They are burning us for questioning, for speaking, for breathing. I stepped back from the console, staring at the fractured horizon. Hive Branos was nothing more than a glowing crater. Other cities were burning like candles left unattended. The glow of each strike reflected in the smoke clouds above, turning the sky into a stire, tapestry of suffering. I thought of the little girl in the crowd. I thought of her question. I thought of my answer. No, they will not take you. I had lied. The Imperium did not need to take the children, it only needed to burn them. As I watched the world erupt in fire, I understood something I had never dared to think. The Imperium did not come to correct rebellion. It came to erase a hesitation that dared to look like doubt. The fires were only the beginning, and I, the man standing in this tower, was the reason they had come. The bombardments did not stop. They changed. What began as precise lances of fire, surgical strikes meant to correct disobedience, became indiscriminate waves of destruction. Whole districts vanished under sheets of incandescent light. Rail lines buckled and curled like dying insects. The heat warped the Manufactorum towers into twisted silhouettes against a bleeding sky. I remember gripping the broken frame of the observation window, watching the horizon pulse with the rhythm of orbital wrath. The distant hives were turning into pillars of smoke. Even from miles away, the heat shimmered through the air, baking the metal beneath my boots. Kelran staggered beside me, his mask fogging with frantic breaths. "Governor, the southern sprawl is gone. The northern hab stacks are collapsing. We're losing every population center." I didn't answer. What could I say? That I understood? That the Imperium was teaching us obedience through extinction? A lieutenant of the palace guard crashed into the room, armor dented, blood streaking his forehead. "Governor, hail. Civilians have breached the inner gates. They're looking for shelter." "Let them in," I said. Kelran's head snapped toward me. "Governor, the palace can't hold them." "It will hold them," I said sharply. "We are not leaving them outside to burn." The lieutenant saluted shakily and sprinted away. Kelran grabbed my shoulder. "Varant, if you bring them in, the Imperium will brand you a collaborator. Harboring agitators." "These are my people," I said, voice low and trembling. "I won't let them be slaughtered in the streets." Kelran's eyes darted around the room as if searching for someone to save him from this moment. "You're condemning us." "No," I whispered. "The Imperium already condemned us. I am only choosing whom I will fail last." A deep, seismic boom rolled through the palace, nearly knocking us from our feet. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere below, a tower collapsed with a tortured groan. Then a new sound, a sound I had never heard in all my years as governor, the low, resonant moan of the world's crust fracturing. I swallowed hard. "They're not just burning cities, they're reshaping the planet." Kelran's voice cracked. "Why? Why would they?" "Because rebellion is cheaper to erase than to correct," I said. "Because it shows other worlds what hesitation costs." The door slammed open again as the lieutenant returned, this time dragging a coughing child in his arms. A boy, eyes watering from smoke, barely conscious. "Stragglers from the outer districts, sir," they collapsed before reaching the inner sanctum. I knelt beside the boy, lifting his chin gently. The skin on his cheeks was blistered from heat exposure. His breath came in ragged sobs. "They're burning us," he whispered. "Why are they burning us?" The question pierced deeper than any orbital lance. Behind us, the Vox crackled to life. A frantic Arbeitsmarshal shouted over static. "To any central authority, Hive Solon has fallen. Civilian casualties too many to count. We cannot." The transmission dissolved into a scream, then silence. Kelran sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "They're not stopping. They're not even slowing down." "No," I said, rising slowly. "They won't. Because this wasn't punishment, it was erasure. The Imperium did not care why the riots began. It did not care about the impossible tithe. It did not care about the starving, the exhausted, the terrified. It cared only that a governor paused when told to obey. I turned from the ruined window. "Find every survivor you can. Bring them to the lower vaults." "Governor," the lieutenant said, voice shaking. "There are thousands pouring into the plaza. We can't take them all. We will take who we can," I whispered, "and we will listen to their screams for the rest." Kelran looked up, tears streaking the grime on his cheeks. "Varant, this fire, it won't end." I nodded. "No," I said softly. "This is only their first mercy. The first mercy of the Imperium is fire. The second is what fire leaves behind." When the orbital strikes finally slowed, never fully stopping, only spacing themselves between breaths, the world did not exhale in relief. It wheezed, it sagged, it groaned. Under the weight of a heat it was never meant to endure. The manufactorums that survived the bombardments now smoldered like wounded beasts, their chimneys coughing ash and molten slag. I descended to the lower vaults with Kelran, the lieutenant, and a scatter of surviving guards. The air grew hotter with every level we passed, as if the planet's crust itself had begun to boil. Civilians crowded the stairwells, burned, trembling. Ash-covered shapes, who had once been families, workers, clerks, mothers, fathers, children. They clung to me as I passed, begging, pleading, sobbing in voices rubbed raw by smoke. Why won't they stop? Where are the saints? Why has the Emperor abandoned us? "Governor, please make them stop. My boy is still out there." Each voice sliced another piece from my soul. I could not answer any of them. The palace vaults were designed to hold state archives and ceremonial relics, not tens of thousands of desperate survivors, but they came anyway, filling every corridor and balcony. They pressed against each other in terrified silence, listening for the next orbital scream. Kelran stopped beside me, shaking. "We can't save them like this." "I know." It was all I could say. A distant boom rolled through the stone. Dust fell like grey snow. Somewhere above, the throne room buckled further, shedding centuries-old statues like loose teeth. Then, something unexpected. A lull, a long, unnatural quiet. The survivors lifted their heads, eyes wide. Children trembled in their parents' arms. People whispered prayers, hoping the hell had finally ended. But I knew better. The Imperium never pauses unless preparing something worse. A faint tremor shivered through the vault floor. Another. Then a deeper vibration, one that resonated in my ribs, in my teeth, in my skull. Kelran grabbed my arm. "Is that artillery?" No. I knew the sound. All governors did, though few ever lived to witness it. I walked toward the nearest cracked viewport and wiped ash away with my sleeve. The light outside had changed white and pure earlier, now dulled, colder. The smoke clouds shifted in slow spirals, as if pushed by some invisible tide. Then I saw it, a wave of pressure sweeping across the horizon, flattening buildings, extinguishing flames, collapsing manufactorum towers inward like collapsing lungs. Not fire, not impact. Atmospheric collapse. The prelude to poison. I felt the temperature drop sharply. Frost formed on the inside of the window, cracking in delicate patterns. People inside the vaults coughed violently as the air thinned. Kelran's voice cracked. "They're turning off the processors early. But the Mechanicus obeys," I whispered. "Always." Another tremor ran through the foundations. This one stronger. Loose stone tumbled from the ceiling. Survivors screamed. The lieutenant shouted orders, trying to wedge open the vents and redirect air flow. But nothing could stop what came next. A hiss low at first, then building echoed through the vault. The world outside warped into a ghostly blur as gas clouds drifted through the ruins like pale serpents. They moved unnaturally, carried not by wind, but by the collapse of breathable air itself. Virus bombs, released now that the fires had done their work. A child near me collapsed, eyes wide, gasping. His mother shrieked and lifted him, only to choke herself seconds later. Kelran fell to his knees. "Varant, we're all going to die." I knelt beside him. "No," I murmured, voice hollow. "We're going to suffer first." Above us, the Imperium's salvation drifted down as softly as morning fog. I closed my eyes. Fire had been mercy. This was its shadow. The gas did not fall like rain. It crawled a slow, deliberate tide of pale green mist, slithering across the ruins of Dorian Forge, feeling its way through every broken street and shattered doorway like a living thing hungry for breath. We sealed the vault doors as best we could, but the seals were old. The metal had warped from the heat of the bombardments. The locking teeth no longer interlaced cleanly. Through the cracks, the gas slipped in thin tendrils, drifting downward in graceful curls, almost beautiful if not for the screams it left behind. The first to die were the elderly, then the infants, then the ones too weak from smoke and fire to muster another breath. One by one, bodies sagged, knees buckling, fingers clawing at throats that no longer knew how to swallow air. Kelran staggered beside me, eyes watering behind his mask. "Governor, help me get them to the inner chambers, please." But the inner chambers were already full. Every vault was full. There was nowhere else to go. I tried to lift a child, a girl no older than 7, but her skin blistered under my fingertips as the airborne pathogen accelerated through her bloodstream. She convulsed, coughing grey foam, and her mother tore her from my grasp, screaming as she cradled her daughter's dissolving body. I stepped back, trembling. "Emperor, forgive me." The lieutenant slammed his shoulder against the vent grate, trying to force it shut, but the mechanism sparked once and froze. He cursed, turning toward me with desperation etched into every line of his face. "Governor, we need purification rites. Filters. Anything. Filters are useless against life-eater strains, I said numbly. His expression crumpled. You knew this would happen? No. The word tasted like ash, but the Imperium did. Overhead, the vault's lumens flickered, their glow dimming against the encroaching fog. The green vapor pooled at our feet first, swirling around boots and ankles, leaving faint hissing burns wherever it touched exposed skin. Kelran collapsed suddenly, wheezing. I caught him before he hit the floor. His mask had cracked along one side, a thin stream of poisoned air seeping in like a whisper. Varant, he rasped. Save the archives, the records. They can't erase everything, but they already had. His body convulsed once, twice, then went limp in my arms. I lowered him gently, but even as his chest stilled, his skin began to soften, discoloring with unnatural speed. The virus had taken him in seconds. I leaned back against the stone pillar, breath shaking. I'm sorry, old friend. The survivors were panicking now, running, collapsing, clutching at each other in hopeless, frantic need. Their voices rose in a chaotic chorus. Seal the gaps. The children, please, my children. The vault is killing us. Governor, do something. I pushed away from the pillar, stumbling toward the center of the vault. Listen to me, everyone, listen. Get low to the ground, cover your faces, don't breathe deeply. But the fog thickened faster than my words could form. Bodies fell, like leaves in a dying garden. Softly, quietly, without ceremony. The little boy I'd carried earlier sat slumped against a column now. His small hands pressed against his chest as he drew shallow, trembling breaths. His eyes found mine wet, terrified, pleading. Governor, why is the sky sick? I knelt beside him, though the fog seared my throat as I did. Because the Imperium is punishing us. His brow furrowed weakly. But we didn't do anything. A tear slid down my cheek, hissing as it touched the gas. No, I whispered, voice breaking. But I did. An explosion tore through the far wall, a Millennium silo collapsing under internal heat. The shockwave sent dust and bodies tumbling across the vault. The gas swirled faster now, hungrily filling the new gaps. I cradled the boy as his breath stuttered. He reached for me. Tiny fingers brushed my cheek. Will the Emperor save us? I closed my eyes as the gas thickened around us, swallowing the vault in green death. No, I whispered. He won't. And in that moment, surrounded by dissolving bodies and the soft hiss of a dying world, I understood the truth the Imperium would never speak. Fire was punishment, poison was doctrine, and mercy was not for worlds like mine. The virus did not kill everyone. Some it spared, at least at first, leaving them half alive, half dissolved, crawling blindly through the fog like the broken cogs of a dying machine. They dragged themselves toward the vault doors, fingers leaving streaks of liquefied flesh on the stone. Their mouths opened and closed soundlessly, lungs too damaged to scream, skin sagging from their bones in wet sheets. A few reached out to me, pleading with eyes already clouded gray. I stepped back, not out of fear, out of shame. These were my people, my responsibility, my failure, but I could not save them, not from this, not from the Imperium. When their bodies finally went still, the fog thickened around them, digesting the remains as gently as falling snow. The virus was efficient, purposeful, a perfect tool of Imperial correction. Kelran lay only a few meters away, his face softened beyond recognition. I forced myself to look at him, to commit the shape of his collapse to memory. Someone had to remember. The lieutenant slammed another vault door with everything he had, bracing his shoulder against the metal until his armor dented. Governor, help me push. We can seal this breach. I moved without thinking, pressing my weight against the edge of the door. It groaned, resistant, metal warped from heat and shock. Together we forced it almost shut, but the fog pushed back, tendrils slipping through the gap like fingers. A woman screamed. A child coughed violently, clutching her stomach. We can't hold it, the lieutenant rasped. I knew he was right. I also knew what the next stage would be. The virus was only the second mercy. The third, the silence was coming. We backed away from the faulty seal as the door shuddered open again under pressure. The fog poured in, flooding the chamber with a slow, deliberate grace. People scrambled onto higher platforms, trampling one another in blind panic as they sought air that no longer existed. I took the lieutenant by the arm. "We need to reach the upper levels. Now." He nodded, eyes wide behind his mask. And together we forced our way through the labyrinth of bodies and debris. Children clung to my coat as I passed, their tiny voices ragged with poison. "Please, please don't leave us. Governor, help. My mother, she's not moving." Every step was agony. Not from the gas burning my throat, but from knowing I was walking past those I had sworn to protect. We reached the central stairwell just as the first atmospheric alarms began to drone. Deep, resonant tones that echoed through the stone corridors like the heartbeat of a dying titan. The lieutenant stumbled. "What is that?" "The processors," I whispered. "They're shutting down. All of them. All of them." He stared at me, horror widening his eyes. "But that will kill whoever the virus hasn't." The alarms intensified, drowning out the coughing, the sobbing, the gasping pleas of the vault survivors. Even through the stone floors, I could feel the shift in air pressure, the thinning, the draining, the quiet collapse of breathable atmosphere. We reached a mid-level balcony. From there we could see the main vault spread out beneath us, a sea of fog and bodies, flickering lanterns dying one by one as oxygen vanished. The little boy I'd held earlier was still there, slumped in his mother's arms. She rocked him gently, even as her own breaths grew shallow, her lips pale. Her eyes remained open, fixed on the vault door, as though she still believed it would open again. I gripped the railing, knuckles white. "Governor," the lieutenant whispered, "we can't stay." "I know." But I didn't move. Not yet. I forced myself to watch, to bear witness, to remember the exact moment when my world crossed from suffering into silence. The fog below settled. The bodies stopped shifting. The coughing grew faint, then ceased. The vault did not empty. It quieted. A silence so complete it felt like a blade pressed to my throat. A silence that the Imperium called mercy. A silence I had earned. The lieutenant placed a trembling hand on my shoulder. "Governor, please." I nodded once, tearing myself away from the sight. As we ascended into the thinning air, the silence followed us like a shadow patient, steady, absolute. We emerged from the vault stairwell into a corridor half collapsed by earlier bombardments, the walls cracked open like the ribs of some vast dead creature. Smoke seeped through the fractures. Ash clung to every surface. The lights overhead flickered with a weak, dying glow, each lumen dimming not because the power was gone, but because there was no longer enough oxygen to feed the flame. The silence was growing. Not the peaceful kind, the predatory kind. The lieutenant pulled his mask tighter, though it did little good now. The atmospheric descent had begun. Every breath felt thin, as though the air itself were thinning in grief. I tasted metal and dust with every inhale. We passed a shattered pict screen still sparking with static. Its final frozen image showed a cheering crowd from some long-forgotten founding day, parade children waving banners, workers lifting their arms in tired pride, sparks from pyrotechnics drifting through the air. The screen crackled, flickered, and died as we walked past, leaving only my reflection staring back. A man who had failed everything. A man the Imperium had allowed to live only long enough to suffer. We climbed another stairwell, each step heavier than the last. The lieutenant paused midway, rubbing his temples. "Governor, I don't feel right." "The air," I said. "It's dropping faster now." "How low?" "Low enough that speech will hurt soon." My voice rasped in my throat. "Low enough that thinking will fade." He swallowed, fear breaking through his discipline. "Are we going to suffocate?" I looked at him not as a leader, not as a governor, but as a condemned man walking beside another condemned man. "We will, if the virus doesn't finish the job first." His shoulders slumped. "Why are they doing this?" For a brief, bitter moment, I almost laughed. Almost. Because the Imperium does not punish rebellion, I said quietly. "It punishes hesitation." We stepped into what remained of the upper promenade, a vast balcony overlooking the capital's central district. The glass dome above had shattered during the first orbital strike, leaving only jagged ribs of metal and a wide opening through which the sky loomed like a festering wound. I walked forward slowly, feeling the cold kiss of thinning atmosphere across my cheeks. The green fog had risen, creeping upward through the levels, swirling lazily like it had all the time in the world. Below us stretched the remains of Dorian Forge. The manufactorums collapsed into molten pits, cranes melted into twisted skeletons. The hives, towers sheared in half, spilling their populations like shattered beehives. The transport rails buckled and curled, trains frozen mid-derailment. The plazas filled with unmoving figures, as if carved from soot. The silence drifted upward with the fog. It was heavier than the gas, heavier than the ash, heavier than the billions of dead whose breaths no longer warmed the world. I felt it in my bones. The lieutenant wiped tears from his mask's lenses. "Governor, my family lived in the West Stacks. I haven't been able to reach them since the first strike." I forced myself to meet his gaze. There was no hope left to give him, only truth. "I'm sorry," I whispered. His shoulders shook as he looked down upon the silent city. "Were they trying to escape? Did they make it to shelter?" "No," I said softly. He turned to me. "How do you know?" "Because escape was never part of the Imperium's plan." A wind swept across the balcony, then thin, weak, trembling. It carried flecks of ash that stung my eyes. Through the wreckage, I saw movement. A group of survivors stumbling through the streets, clutching masks, dragging children. They struggled across the plaza, seeking refuge in a city that had none left to offer. I stepped closer to the edge, heart pounding. "Lieutenant, look." He leaned forward and froze. The survivors had almost reached the shelter entrance when the sky flashed white again. Not bright, not explosive, just final. A pulse of energy rippled outward from the distant manufactorum block, flattening every structure in its radius in a perfect sphere of silent force. The survivors vanished erased. In a single breath, the lieutenant collapsed to his knees. "No, no, please no." I closed my eyes. Fire, poison, silence. The Imperium had delivered all three, and there was still one mercy left to give, the one they reserved only for those they wished to humiliate completely: survival. I opened my eyes again, staring into the broken horizon. "I did this," I whispered. "All of it began with me." And in the dying wind, I swear the world whispered back, "Yes, silence is not the absence of sound. Not here, not on a dying world. Silence is the weight that settles after all other suffering has finished its work. A final mercy the Imperium believes it grants us, though there is nothing merciful in the quiet that followed the fire and poison." I felt it first in my ears, a faint pressure like descending into deep water. The distant rumble of collapsing hives softened, the crackle of burning scaffolds dulled. Even the gas fog moving through the streets seemed to muffle its own whisper. The world was going quiet in layers, peeling sound away piece by piece. The lieutenant and I stood on the upper promenade, staring down at a city whose breath had left it. The fog had settled thick across the lower levels now, crawling over bodies and wreckage, absorbing the last dying groans of a civilization strangled into stillness. He tugged at my coat, voice trembling. "Governor, it's too quiet. Something's wrong." I didn't answer. The quiet was intentional, engineered, weaponized. The atmospheric processors weren't just shutting down oxygen. They were consuming sound. I'd read about this once, deep in a restricted administratum archive meant only for governors and inquisitorial liaisons. Certain worlds, marked for irreversible discipline, received a silence net, a mechanicus protocol that dampened atmospheric resonance, choking not only breath, but also communication, panic, and hope. It made rebellion impossible because it made suffering private. No cries, no screams, no last words carried to the sky, just guilt echoing inside one's own skull. The lieutenant shuddered. "Governor, can they hear us?" "No," I whispered. "There's no one left to hear anything." We moved slowly along the balcony, the thin air making each step feel like walking through water. My lungs protested, my vision blurred. The body tires faster when the world is ending. At the far end of the promenade, the great cathedral of industry loomed half-collapsed, its once brilliant stained glass melted into slag. Statues of saints and laborers lay shattered across the courtyard below, their faces eroded by gas and heat until they looked like mourners weeping in the dust. We passed a row of dead servo skulls, their optics dim, their wings frozen in mid-flight. One hung from a length of broken cabling like a corpse on a noose. The lieutenant stopped. "Governor, look." Across the city, a faint shimmer rippled in the five, air like heat distortion, but colder. A translucent veil spanning the horizon, curving down toward the surface. The quarantine net, a perfect sphere of containment. Once fully deployed, nothing, no air, no spores, no signals escapes a quarantined world. It is the Imperium's way of ensuring that death remains obediently inside its assigned borders. "We're sealed," the lieutenant whispered. "They've locked us inside." I nodded, though my voice felt trapped in my throat. They always intended to. As the net tightened, an eerie pressure settled across my skull. My heartbeat echoed louder inside me, amplified by the thinning world. Every breath rasped like tearing cloth. The lieutenant swayed on his feet, gripping the railing for balance. "Governor, why would they leave us alive for this?" he asked quietly. "Why not finish it with the bombs?" I closed my eyes. "Because they want the last survivors to break," I said. "To feel what rebellion costs. Understand that death is not the punishment living is." He stared at me with hollow eyes. "Then why save you?" It was the first time he had asked that question. It would not be the last. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I looked out across the dead city and felt the silence press more tightly around us, a suffocating blanket wrapping the world in its final shroud. The fires had burned our flesh, the poison had stripped our breath. But the silence came for our souls. The silence deepened as we re-entered what remained of the upper palace. The doors no longer creaked. The distant collapses no longer echoed. Even our footsteps, heavy, labored, unsteady, felt swallowed before the sound could fully form. The quiet wasn't natural. It was imposed. The Imperium's final correction. The lieutenant stumbled down the corridor beside me, one hand dragging along the wall for balance. His breaths came shallow, thin, barely able to draw what little oxygen remained. I heard every one of them, not because they were loud, but because they were alone in the suffocating quiet. We reached the central hall, a once grand chamber now cracked open to the dim green sky. Fractured marble pillars leaned like broken teeth. Ash drifted across the floor in soft waves. At the far end lay the remains of a great mural once depicting the Emperor's glory over Forge World industry, now blackened, peeling, its holy paints dripping down the stone like dried blood. The lieutenant swayed. "Governor, I can't. It's hard to think. The silence net affects cognition," I murmured. "It compresses sound waves, strains the skull, makes your thoughts echo." He pressed a shaking hand to his head. "Why? Why silence the survivors?" "Because they do not want survivors," I said. "Only confessions." He stared blankly. "Confessions?" Before I could answer, the hall's far door groaned open, not from mechanical noise, but from the shift in light and dust. A figure stepped inside, tall, black-coated, hat brim casting a perfect shadow over his eyes, an inquisitorial commissar, Verus Luthrex. He walked toward us without hurry, without hesitation, boots sinking softly into the ash-laden floor. Each step left a perfect imprint, neat, controlled, deliberate. His coat bore no scorch marks. His respirator was pristine. Authority radiated from him with a weight that made even the silence feel secondary. The lieutenant moved instinctively toward his weapon, then froze as Luthrex raised a finger, not a threat, but a command. The lieutenant's arm dropped uselessly to his side. "Governor Varent Hale," Luthrex said, his voice cutting through the silent air with surgical precision. Your world persists longer than expected. I swallowed, throat scraping dry. Commissar, you ordered this? He did not blink. He did not look away. He simply inclined his head. The Imperium ordered it. I ensured it. The lieutenant stepped forward, anger flickering behind his weakening breaths. You burned us, poisoned us, suffocated us. Why? We followed the Emperor. You hesitated, Luthrex said. One sentence, cold, final. The lieutenant's knees buckled. I caught his arm. Commissar, millions begged for mercy. Families, children, they were not rebels. They became rebels, Luthrex replied, the moment you entertained the idea of sparing them. My vision swam. You punished an entire world because I paused. You were a governor, he said calmly. Governors do not pause, they obey. He walked past me, surveying the shattered hall with the calm interest of a man inspecting a ledger. We removed the disobedient. We purged the corrupted. We refined what remained. Refined? I whispered harshly. You mean exterminated? Luthrex's gaze finally met mine. There was no anger in his eyes, no cruelty, just certainty. In the Emperor's service, he said, extermination is refinement. The lieutenant collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. He could no longer draw. I knelt beside him, supporting his shoulders as his respirator struggled. Luthrex approached us slowly. Sergeant, he said evenly, your service ends here. The lieutenant tried to stand, tried to protest, but his body was too starved of air, too weakened by poison. Luthrex placed a hand on his shoulder almost gently and guided him back down. Governor, Luthrex said without looking at me, you will come with me. You still have use. The lieutenant choked. Governor, don't go. I gripped his hand, my heart fracturing. I won't leave you. Luthrex's voice sharpened. You will. He reached into his coat and withdrew a data slate black sealed, marked with an inquisitorial sigil. It bore my name. Governor Verent Hale, he said, sign this declaration, and your world's dead will be recorded as faithful citizens who succumbed to tragic calamity. My stomach twisted. And if I refuse? Luthrex raised his eyes. Then they die traitors, he said. All of them, including your wife, including your son. The silence pressed tighter around us. He extended the slate. Choose. The data slate felt heavier than any weapon I had ever lifted. Heavy like judgment. Heavy like the hands of a dying world pressing against my chest, begging for truth I could not give them. On its cracked surface, beneath the inquisitorial sigil, were the words, Declaration of Planetary Heresy, Governorial Confession Required. The lieutenant clawed at my arm, breath shallow, mask fogging with desperation. Governor, don't sign it. Don't let them. Luthrex silenced him with a single glance. Sergeant, the commissar said, voice almost soft. Your loyalty is admirable, but your understanding is limited. I forced air into my lungs, thin, bitter, vanishing. Commissar Luthrex, what does my signature change? The world is dead. It changes everything, he replied. History, legacy, the narrative that will endure long after your ashes settle. His boots crunched softly on the debris-littered floor as he stepped closer. If you sign, Dorian Forge will be remembered as a loyal world ravaged by tragic malfunction, an accident of atmospheric collapse. Your people will receive rights. Their memories will remain sanctioned. He paused. And your family will receive burial honors befitting faithful citizens of the Imperium. My throat tightened. And if I refuse? He looked at me as though the answer were obvious. Then Dorian Forge becomes a cautionary tale of sedition, its population forever branded heretics, their graves unmarked, their names stricken from every record. Your wife, your son, reduced to footnotes of treachery. The hall swayed around me. Or maybe that was just the thin air crushing in on my skull. The lieutenant clenched his teeth, fury burning through his breaking breath. Governor, he's lying. The Imperium doesn't care about records. It doesn't care about Luthrex cut him off quietly. He knows I'm not lying, because I did. That was the worst part. Governors know the truth behind bureaucratic cruelty. We are the ones who sign the papers that decide which worlds are remembered as faithful and which as traitors. My hesitation damned billions. My signature could damn them forever. Luthrex extended the stylus. Choose, Governor Hale. For once in your life, do not hesitate. The words hit me like a lash. I knelt beside the lieutenant. His breaths were shallow, more tremor than in Hale. His eyes searched mine, begging for an answer I could not give. Please, he whispered, don't let them rewrite what happened. Don't let them turn our suffering into protocol. He was right. He deserved truth. They all did, but truth in the process. Imperium was its own execution. I bowed my head. I'm sorry. His grip tightened weakly. Varant, don't. But I was already rising. Luthrex watched me approach with a calm that made my skin crawl. Good, he said. Even now, you prove useful. My hands trembled as I took the stylus. Every part of me screamed not to do it. Every memory of the crowds, of the children, of the vaults filled with gas, begged me to reject this final indignity. But then I remembered my wife's smile, my son's laughter, their bodies lying silent in the poison fog. If I refused, their names would be spat upon, their memory erased, condemned as traitors to a god who never heard them cry. I signed. The data slate chimed softly in almost gentle tone, as though satisfied. Luthrex nodded once, sealing the document with a press of his thumb. It is done, he said. Your world dies as a loyal servant, and you will live to bear witness. The lieutenant's voice broke, behind me. Varant, how could you? I couldn't bring myself to turn. Luthrex placed a hand on my shoulder. You will be evacuated. You will testify to higher authorities, and you will carry the memory of this world alone. I stared at the ash drifting in the air, the silence pressing in, the weight of billions settling on my lungs. My voice was barely a whisper. Why me? Luthrex smiled, not in warmth, but in victory. Because someone must remember what happens to governors who hesitate. Outside, the sky cracked with distant fire as the final cleansing began continent-wide bombardments, silencing the last breaths of a murdered world. I closed my eyes. I had not saved my people. I had not avenged them. I had only ensured their graves would not be spat upon. And for that, the Imperium allowed me to live. The evacuation did not feel like rescue. It felt like theft of breath, of memory, of punishment I should have shared with my people. The Stormhawks arrived without ceremony, their hulls gleaming with the cold precision of Imperial design. They descended through the sickly green haze, repulsors kicking up clouds of ash that danced in slow spirals around the corpses in the plaza. The silence net muffled even the roar of their engines, turning the landing into a quiet, obedient gesture of bureaucratic efficiency. 2 stormtroopers stepped out first, visors opaque, movements immaculate. Between them walked Commissar Luthrex, coat unburned, posture unbroken, expression carved from certainty. Governor Hale, he said, it is time. I did not move. The lieutenant's body lay a few meters behind me, half slumped against a broken column. He had stopped breathing moments after I signed the confession. I had heard the last rasp of air leave his lungs, the faintest sound in a world that no longer allowed cries. I had closed his eyes myself, and now the ship that would take me away from this world stood waiting as though nothing had happened. I finally turned to Luthrex. There are still survivors. He shook his head once. Not anymore. You didn't look. I don't need to, he replied, voice steady. The Mechanicus has already confirmed atmospheric depletion is complete. No one can live in this air. My throat tightened. I shouldn't live in it either. No, Luthrex agreed. You shouldn't. The admission cut deeper than accusation. I looked up at the sky, a swirling canopy of green fog, cracked by faint flashes of orbital fire as the Navy finished its assigned cleansing patterns. The silence net made the bombardment feel distant, muted, like thunder from a dream you wanted to wake from but couldn't. "This is my world," I whispered. "My home." Was. The single word hit me harder than anything the Imperium had unleashed. I forced myself to look around one last time. At the broken manufactorums that had once employed millions. At the scorched towers that had once pierced the clouds. At the empty plazas where families had gathered on holy days. At the vault entrances now sealed under landslides of stone and ash. Every part of it was gone. Broken. Finished. And I had signed the document that explained all of this away. Luthrex extended a hand toward the Stormhawk. "Governor, if you die here, your world dies a heretic's death." I closed my eyes. "My people are already gone. Not their memory." His voice softened, not with kindness, but with precision. "You ensured their legacy was preserved. That is why you still draw breath." I almost laughed. The sound caught in my throat, half choked by thin air. "My breath is a crime," I said. "Your breath," Luthrex replied, "is a duty." He motioned again. "This is not optional." I stepped forward because I had no choice. Ash swirled around my footsteps, rising like grey ghosts from the ground. I felt the weight of every life crushed beneath those ashes, every tennate scream swallowed by the silence, every desperate hand I hadn't reached in time. At the ramp of the Stormhawk, I stopped. I turned and faced my world, my ruined palace, my silent city, the vaults buried beneath my feet, the billions who would never speak again. And I breathed in, a slow, deliberate breath of poisoned air. It tasted of dust and metal and failure. Luthrex watched me closely. "There is nothing left here." "No," I said quietly. "There is everything left." He waited. "So much suffering," I whispered. "And none of it will matter," he gestured sharply. Inside, I stepped aboard. The ramp hissed closed. The silence outside remained absolute, but inside the Stormhawk there was a new kind of quiet. A personal one, a hollow one, a silence built not by the Imperium's machines, but by my own heart. As the ship lifted from the ground, leaving the corpse of Dorian Forge behind, I pressed my forehead against the cold metal wall and breathed the filtered air of someone permitted to live while billions had not. And I hated every breath. The Stormhawk rose through the collapsing atmosphere like a blade cutting through rotting cloth. I felt the pressure shift in my skull as we pierced the thinning air and entered the upper layers of the green-tinted haze. Below us, my world shrank, its broken towers and scorched streets blurring into a single mass of dark ruin. I pressed my palm to the cold wall beside me, as if I could still touch the city through the metal, as if it would answer me. But the only voice left was the low hum of the Stormhawk's engines. Luthrex stood across from me, hands clasped behind his back, face unreadable. 2 stormtroopers flanked him, their masks reflecting the flickering lights overhead. The air inside the transport was clean, filtered, almost sweet. It felt wrong, like breathing stolen air. "Your extraction is a courtesy, Governor Hale," Luthrex said. "Few worlds are granted the dignity of a Cromp, surviving witness." "A witness?" I whispered. "Or a warning?" His eyes narrowed faintly. "Both." The Stormhawk shuddered as it broke through the last layer of atmosphere. Outside the viewport, the clouds rolled away, revealing the black void above and the Imperial Navy waiting. A dozen warships, their hulls gleaming with the golden sigils of the Imperium, hung like cold stars against the darkness. They did not drift. They did not reposition. They simply watched. As if admiring their handiwork, a picked screen flickered to life beside me, broadcasting a wide-angle view of Dorian Forge. From orbit, my world looked sick, its once blue oceans now churned with chemical decay. Vast scars, titanic rifts, and glowing craters marred its surface. Fires still burned in places where oxygen hadn't fully collapsed yet, their orange light pulsing like the last desperate heartbeats of a dying beast. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. The Commissar stepped beside the screen. "The cleansing is nearly complete. Viral saturation has reached 98%. Structural collapse on the northern hemisphere is progressing." He paused. A continent will soon fall into the sea. My stomach twisted. How many? How many survived? Luthrex checked a data slate with maddening calm. Planetary projections estimate 0. The word echoed inside me. 0. 0 like a hollow clock striking the end of time. I leaned forward, gripping the metal edge of the seat. You call this compliance. You call this loyalty. But this is extinction. This is order, Luthrex replied. A tremor ran through the ship as the first of the final bombardments struck. Through the viewport, I saw a beam of light carve down from one of the warships, spearing deep into the crust. A ripple of molten rock spread outward, devouring entire continents in glowing red lines. Luthrex watched, as if observing a foundry at work. This is purification, Governor. Necessary, regrettable, and sanctioned. I felt heat gathering behind my eyes, anger, grief, something beyond both. Why let me live? Luthrex turned to me fully now, his expression the closest I had ever seen to honesty. Because you must speak, he said. I will not lie for you. You already have, he replied. Your signature sealed the narrative. Your confession will reinforce it. Without you, Dorian Forge risks martyrdom. And martyrs inspire rebellion. I swallowed hard. And what if I refuse? Then your name becomes heresy, he said simply. Your family's legacy burns with the planet below. The dead will not be granted burial. Their memory will be erased. You will not allow that. And Emperor, help me, he was right. The next bombardment hit, the crust split. A volcano of molten oceans erupted upward, glowing against the void. My world died again. I slumped back against the cold metal wall, shaking. What am I now, Commissar? A witness? A traitor? A coward? Luthrex regarded me with a gaze like sharpened stone. You are what the Imperium requires you to be, a reminder that hesitation is rebellion. The Stormhawk banked toward the command ship, leaving behind the burning corpse of Dorian Forge. I pressed my forehead to the viewport glass. And for the first time since the silence net descended, I wept. Not for myself, not even for my family, but for the billions who had believed in me, and deserved better than fire, poison, and silence. They placed me in a chamber that pretended to be comfortable, soft, light, clean air. A desk crafted from polished ironwood. A reclaimer unit humming gently in the corner. It was a room for dignitaries, for officials awaiting debriefing, for men who still had a world to represent. But I had no world. Only ashes inside my lungs and guilt inside every bone that survived the burning. The door sealed with a soft hiss as the stormtroopers left. Luthrex entered last, stepping across the threshold with the ball. Same calm certainty he had shown since the moment he ordered my world's death. He placed a Vox recorder on the desk. A small device, unremarkable, but it felt heavier than any weapon. This, he said, is where you will speak. I stared at it. My reflection gaunt, ash-stained, eyes hollowed from grief stared back at me. What is left to say? I asked. Everything, Luthrex replied. Your testimony will become the official account. The sanctioned version. The one that will shape how the galaxy remembers Dorian Forge. I laughed, a broken, rasping sound that hurt my ribs. A lie. A truth, he corrected calmly. One that preserves order. I sank into the chair. It felt like sitting in a grave dug specifically to fit the shape of my failure. Luthrex approached the window overlooking the void. Beyond it, my world spun silently, glowing faintly with the fires still spreading across its surface. Clouds of chemical fog wrapped around its equator, like a noose. Cracks glowed where the crust had collapsed. Entire continents drifted apart as molten seas swallowed their edges. Look, he said. Dorian Forge is quiet now. Quiet. A word that felt like a knife. You call this quiet, I whispered. But I hear them. Every time I close my eyes. That is why you were spared, Luthrex replied. Memory is a tool, Governor, and pain is obedience. I gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles whitening. You could have killed me. Yes. Why didn't you? He finally turned to face me, eyes cold, but not cruel, determined. but not hateful. A man who believed he had done the Emperor's work with perfect precision. Because if you died, he said, your world would be remembered as traitors, your family would be erased, their names would rot in silence. He stepped closer, and you could not bear that. He was right. Emperor, forgive me, he was right. I lowered my head. What do you want of your truth, he said. Not the one you feel, the one the Imperium requires. He tapped the Vox recorder. Speak of malfunction, of tragedy, of unfortunate atmospheric collapse. Speak of your people as loyal. Speak of yourself as steadfast. Speak of everything except the hesitation that damned you. And if I refuse? My voice barely carried the question. Luthrex placed a hand on the recorder. You already signed. The narrative is sealed. This is only your final duty. I stared at the recorder, my mind churning with memories I no longer deserved to keep. The first orbital firestorm, the screams in the vaults, the gas creeping along the floors, the silence settling over their bodies. My wife's final question, my son's final breath. The lieutenant whispering, "Don't go," with his last strength. The little girl asking if the Emperor would save them. He didn't. I pressed the activation rune. The recorder hummed softly, waiting. My throat constricted. Words fought to form. I tasted the air of a ship that had not suffered. I felt the weight of a world that had. I felt the shame of breath that billions no longer drew. Luthrex stood still, watching, expecting, knowing I would comply, because I had no choice, because memory was all I had left, because guilt was the only thing still breathing in me. I exhaled slowly and began. My name is Varant Hale, former governor of Dorian Forge, and this is my account. The words left my mouth like broken glass. I spoke for hours, of lies, of protocol, of manufactured tragedy, of sanctioned obedience. When I finished, Luthrex collected the recorder, nodded once, and left the room without another word. I sat alone in the silence he left behind, a silence that felt like home now, a silence that had followed me from the corpse of my world, a silence I deserved. I leaned back, staring through the viewport at the drifting shard that had once been my continent. And with the ashes of Dorian Forge still thick in my lungs, I whispered my final truth, one that would never reach any record, any archive, any ear but my own. I carry a world's screams in a heart that no longer knows how to beat.